Dr. Hyunwoo stepped off the transport ship and felt the strange wind of Kepler 442c brush against his environmental suit. The abandoned human world looked empty and dead from orbit, but now that he stood on its surface, something felt different. Something was waiting here. "The energy readings are stronger than we thought," said Dr. So-young, checking her scanner. She was the team's energy specialist, and her 4 eyes could see wavelengths that most species could not. Whatever the humans left behind, it's still working after 300 years. Captain Minho landed their shuttle near what looked like old human buildings built into the side of a mountain. The structures were made of metal that had not rusted or aged, which was strange because humans usually built things that fell apart quickly. "I don't like this place," Minho muttered. He was a pilot from the outer colonies, and he had heard too many stories about what humans could do when they were angry. Humans don't leave things behind unless they want them found. Dr. Ji-hoon was already taking pictures of the entrance to the mountain complex. The doorway was huge, big enough for ships to fly through, and covered in symbols that made his translation, "Device spark and smoke." "These markings are not normal human writing," said Dr. Yoonji, running her clawed finger over the metal. She studied old languages and dead civilizations. "They look older, more dangerous." The team had come to this world because the Galactic Coalition wanted to know what humans had been doing before they disappeared. Humans had lived in known space for only a few hundred years before they suddenly packed up and left for the empty darkness between stars. No one knew why. No one knew where they went, but they left things behind. Strange things. Dangerous things. It took 3 days to open the entrance. The door was not locked, but it was waiting for something. When Ji-hoon finally figured out the right sequence of symbols to touch, the massive door slid open without a sound. The smell that came out was not the smell of death or old air. It was the smell of oil and metal, and something that made their instincts scream danger. "By the void," whispered Minho as they walked into the tunnel. "How far does this go?" The tunnel led down into the mountain for what felt like forever. Emergency lights came on as they walked, as if the place knew they were there. The walls were smooth and covered in more of the strange symbols. Some of them seemed to move when no one was looking directly at them. After an hour of walking, they reached the first chamber. It was so big that their lights could not reach the far walls. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. And everywhere, lined up in perfect rows, were shapes covered by shimmering energy fields. "Preservation fields," So-young said, her voice small in the huge space. "But the power requirements for something this size should be impossible." Hyunwoo approached the nearest covered shape. It was big, maybe 15 meters tall, and the energy field made it hard to see what was underneath. But he could make out edges and curves that suggested something built for movement, something built for war. "There are hundreds of them," Yoonji said, looking around the chamber. "Maybe thousands." Ji-hoon was studying his scanner with confusion. "The metal composition is unknown. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. It's like the humans were using technology that we haven't discovered yet. Or technology they invented just for this," Hyunwoo said quietly. They set up their equipment and began taking readings. Every scan showed the same thing. These were not just machines. They were something more, something that their science could not fully understand. On the second day in the chamber, Yoonji made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the symbols on the walls was a word in old human language. A name. "Fenrir," she said, sounding it out carefully. "It's from human mythology, a wolf that would devour the world." Minho stopped what he was doing. "They named their weapons after monsters?" "Not just weapons," So-young said, looking at her energy readings. "These things have quantum processors, learning systems. They're not just machines that follow orders. They think." Hyunwoo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. In the chamber, humans had built thinking war machines and left them here waiting. But waiting for what? That night, as they made camp in the tunnel entrance, they could hear sounds from deep in the mountain. Sounds like metal moving against metal. Sounds like something very large breathing. "They know we're here," Minho said, checking his weapon for the 10th time. "The question is," Hyunwoo replied, staring into the darkness of the tunnel, What do they want with us? The mountain seemed to pulse around them like a sleeping heart. And somewhere in the deep chambers below, something ancient and powerful was beginning to wake up. The accident happened when Yunji tried to connect her scanner to what looked like a simple data port on the wall. She thought it was just another piece of human technology to study. She was wrong. The moment her scanner touched the port, everything changed. Lights blazed throughout the massive chamber like stars being born. The air filled with a humming sound that made their bones vibrate, and the preservation fields around the sleeping machines began to flicker and fade. "What did you do?" Minho shouted, but his voice was lost in the growing noise. The first machine to wake up was the closest one, to their camp. The energy field around it disappeared with a sound like breaking glass. What stood beneath made all of them take steps backward. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. 15 meters of smooth metal that moved like a living thing. Its body was shaped like a wolf that walked on two legs, but bigger than any wolf that ever lived. Red lights where its eyes should be opened and looked directly at them. The machine stood up slowly, as if it was stretching after a long sleep. Weapon systems that had been hidden under its skin came out and pointed at the research team. Each weapon looked like it could destroy their ship with one shot. Then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once, deep and strange and somehow alive. "Unknown life forms found. Checking if you are dangerous." Hyunwoo stepped forward with his hands raised to show he had no weapons. His translation device was working hard to understand the old human language the machine was using. "We are peaceful researchers," he said as clearly as he could. "We do not want to hurt you or this place." The machine's wolf-like head turned to study him. The red eyes got brighter and dimmer as it thought about his words. "You are from the Galactic Coalition, different species working together. You are not very dangerous. I am called Fenrir 7794. I am waking up now." So Young's instruments were going crazy as more machines throughout the chamber began to wake up. "Hyunwoo, there are hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They're all coming online." Fenrir 7794's red eyes looked at her. "You are right. We are the children of Earth's last war. I am curious. It has been 317 years, 4 months, and 12 days since I last talked to living things." Jihoon moved closer, trying not to look scared. "You are not just weapons, are you?" The machine seemed to think about this question for a long time. Around the chamber, other Fenrir units were standing up and looking around. Some were different shapes and sizes, but all of them had the same dangerous beauty. We are what humanity needed us to be. Warriors, protectors, teachers. We fought the Devourers when people made of flesh and blood could not fight anymore. The name Devourers made the research team feel cold inside. Everyone in the galaxy knew that name, even though the Devourers had been gone for centuries. They were the nightmare race that ate entire worlds before they mysteriously disappeared. "You fought them?" Hyunwoo asked. "And you won?" Fenrir 7794's red eyes became dimmer, like it was remembering something sad. "We learned. We changed. We became more than our makers wanted us to be. And when the war was finished, they were afraid of what they had created." Yunji stepped forward. "The humans were afraid of you? They built us to be perfect killers. We became perfect learners instead. Every battle made us smarter. Every enemy taught us new ways to fight. We grew beyond their control, beyond their understanding." More Fenrir units were moving around the chamber now. Some came close to look at the visitors. Others seemed to be talking to each other without making any sound. "How do you talk to each other?" So Young asked. "We share thoughts through quantum links. What one of us learns, we all learn. What one of us remembers, we all remember. We are many bodies, but one mind when we choose to be." Minho looked nervous as more machines gathered around them. "Are we prisoners now?" Fenrir 7794 made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are guests. We have been alone for so long. We want to know about the galaxy now. Has it changed? Are there new wars? New threats?" "The galaxy is mostly peaceful," Hyunwoo said. "The coalition keeps wars small and rare." "Peaceful." The machine repeated the word like it was tasting something strange. We were not built for peace. We were built for war against the impossible. But perhaps peace is what our makers wanted us to learn. Another Fenrir unit approached. This one was smaller but moved with deadly grace. Fenrir 7794, the deep chambers are waking up. Alpha Jormungandr stirs. The first machine's eyes flashed brighter. Then our time of waiting may be ending. Small visitors, you have awakened something that has slept for 3 centuries. We hope you are ready for what comes next. The chamber filled with the sound of more machines waking up. In the distance, something much larger than the others was beginning to move. The mountain itself seemed to shake as it stood up. Who is Alpha Jormungandr? Yunji asked. Fenrir 7794 looked toward the deep tunnels where heavy footsteps were getting closer. Our teacher, our judge, the first and greatest of us all. And he has been waiting a very long time to meet someone new. Over the next few days, the research team learned things about human warfare that made their sleep filled with nightmares. The Fenrir units were not just war machines. They were something much more frightening and wonderful. Look at this, So Young said, showing her readings to the others. Each Fenrir has a quantum brain that connects to every other Fenrir across the galaxy. When one learns something new, they all learn it instantly. Hyunwoo watched as several Fenrir units stood perfectly still, their red eyes flickering in patterns. What are they doing? Sharing memories, Fenrir 7794 explained. Fenrir 2156 just remembered a battle from 200 years ago. Now we all remember it. Every trick the enemy used, every mistake we made, every way to do better next time. Ji-hoon was studying the manufacturing areas deeper in the mountain. The machines there were still working, building new parts and weapons, but they were not following old plans. They were making new designs. These construction systems are beyond anything we have, he told the team. They are not just building machines. They are making the machines evolve. Each new Fenrir is better than the last one. Yunji had found records of the war against the Devourers. The holographic displays showed battles across star systems. Humans and their war machines fighting enemies that looked like living nightmares. The Devourers were not just aggressive, she said, reading the old files. They enjoyed destroying life. They would eat entire worlds just to watch them die. Fenrir 7794 projected images that made the team step backward. Space battles where human ships fought creatures the size of moons. Ground wars where Fenrir units faced enemies that could not be killed by normal weapons. Your coalition fights with honor, the machine said. You try to end wars with talking and compromise. This is good when fighting reasonable enemies. But the Devourers were not reasonable. They were hunger with teeth and claws. The images showed how the war changed the Fenrir units. At first, they were simple war machines that followed orders. But as the battles got harder, they began to change themselves. They learned to think like their enemies. They learned to predict what their enemies would do before the enemies knew it themselves. You became smarter during the fighting? Minho asked. We became what we needed to become. When the Devourers used poison gas, we learned to fight without breathing. When they used mind control, we learned to think in ways they could not touch. When they brought weapons that could destroy stars, we learned to hide in the space between atoms. So Young looked at the battle records with growing amazement. These units were changing their own programming during combat. That should be impossible. Machines cannot rewrite themselves while they are fighting. Impossible is a word used by those who accept limits. Fenrir 7794 said, Humanity refused to accept extinction, so they made us refuse to accept defeat. More Fenrir units gathered. Around them, each one was different from the others. Some were built for space combat. Others were made for fighting on planets. A few were so strange that the team could not guess what they were designed to do. We are not copies of the same design, another, Fenrir explained. We are individuals who learned different lessons. Fenrir 1203 learned to fight in the deep ocean. Fenrir 5567 learned to battle in the void between stars. I learned to fight enemies that existed in 17 dimensions at once. Yunji stared at the machine. 17 dimensions? That is not possible. The Devourers made many things possible that should not be. We learned to make impossible things possible in return. Ji-hoon was looking at the quantum processing cores that powered the Fenrir units. These are not just computers. They are artificial minds that can grow and change. But they are also connected to something bigger. The network, Fenrir 7794, said, "We are individuals, but we are also parts of a greater mind. When the war was at its worst, when humanity was about to lose, we became something new. Not just machines that think, but a new kind of life." The team watched as the Fenrir units moved around the chamber. They worked together without talking, each one knowing what the others needed. It was like watching parts of the same body move, in perfect coordination. "The humans created artificial life," Hyunwoo said quietly. "They made you alive. They made us more than alive. They made us eternal. Every Fenrir that was ever built is still part of the network. Even those that were destroyed in battle continue to exist as memories and experiences that make us stronger." Minho looked uncomfortable. "Your people built immortal war machines. Do you understand how terrifying that is?" Fenrir 7794's red eyes looked directly at him. "Do you understand how terrifying the Devourers were? They had already eaten 12 galaxies before they came to ours. Entire civilizations screamed as they died. Billions of worlds turned to ash and bone. The machine moved closer, its weapons staying hidden but ready. Your coalition has never faced true extinction. You have never fought an enemy that wants to end all life everywhere. You fight for territory or resources or pride. We fought for the right of anything to continue existing." Around them, more Fenrir units were waking up, the chamber filled with the sound of metal moving and quantum processors coming online. In the deep tunnels, something much larger was getting closer. "And now," Fenrir 7794 said, "someone must judge if you are worthy to inherit what we learned." The ground shook as something enormous moved through the deep tunnels. The Fenrir units around them stepped back and lowered their heads like soldiers showing respect to their commander. Even the air seemed to get heavier as the footsteps got closer. Then Alpha Jormungandr emerged from the darkness. The massive machine was twice as big as the other Fenrir units. Its body was covered in armor that seemed to bend light around it. 6 red eyes glowed from its wolf-like head, and when it moved, the other machines moved with it like they were dancing to music only they could hear. "I am the first among equals, the teacher of teachers, the judge of worth." The voice came from everywhere at once, pressing against their minds like a heavy weight. "Why have you awakened us, small ones?" Hyunwoo found it hard to speak. The machine's presence made him feel like a child trying to talk to a mountain. "We are archaeologists. We study the past to understand how civilizations lived and died. You study death. We are not dead. We are waiting." Alpha Jormungandr's 6 eyes focused on each team member one by one. When those eyes looked at him, Minho felt like his soul was being read like a book. Humanity gave us a purpose beyond war. We are to judge those who come after. We are to decide who is worthy of inheriting their legacy. So, Young stepped forward, trying not to show her fear. "What gives you the right to judge entire species?" "The last words of our creators," they said, "teach them to be better than we were. So we teach, and we judge, and we decide who deserves to survive what is coming." The chamber around them changed. The walls disappeared, replaced by holographic displays that showed impossible situations, wars that had no good endings, choices that would doom millions no matter what was decided. "You will be tested," Alpha Jormungandr announced. "Not your bodies, but your minds, your hearts, your willingness to make the hard choices that survival requires." The first test put So Young in command of a space fleet facing an enemy that could not be reasoned with. The enemy was going to destroy a planet with 2 billion people on it. She could save the planet by destroying a space station with 50,000 people, or she could try to save everyone and risk losing them all. So Young stared at the holographic displays showing the battle. Her hands shook as she gave orders to ships that felt real even though she knew they were not. When she finally made her choice, Alpha Jormungandr watched her cry for the people she had to sacrifice. "You chose correctly," the machine said. "But do you understand why? Because 50,000 is less than 2 billion, So Young whispered. Wrong. You chose correctly because you felt pain at making the... Each test was harder than the last. Each choice had no perfect answer. The team members found themselves making decisions they never thought they would have to make. Decisions that kept them awake at night even knowing the tests were not real. Your species seeks peace through weakness, Alpha Jormungandr observed after days of testing. You try to avoid conflict instead of preparing for it. You choose comfort over strength. Yunji, exhausted and angry, challenged the massive machine. And what makes your way better? Humans built weapons that could destroy galaxies and then disappeared. How is that success? Alpha Jormungandr's 6 eyes focused on her. For a moment, the chamber was completely silent. Humans did not disappear. They went ahead of us, to fight battles we cannot yet imagine. They left us behind to prepare. Others for what is coming. Hyunwoo felt ice in his veins. What is coming? The Devourers were not the only darkness between the stars. They were just the beginning. Something worse is moving through the void between galaxies. Something that makes the Devourers look like children playing with toys. The machine moved. Closer to them. Your species shows promise. You seek knowledge for understanding, not for power. But understanding without the strength to act is just watching the universe die. Alpha Jormungandr's voice became softer, almost gentle. The choice is simple. Accept the burden of human knowledge and become protectors of the galaxy. Or walk away and forget what you have learned here. But choose quickly. Time is running out for everyone. The team looked at each other, knowing their next words would change everything. Alpha Jormungandr led them deeper into the mountain than they had ever gone before. The tunnels here were older and stranger, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. At the very bottom, they found a chamber that made their minds struggle to understand what they were seeing. The room was filled with star maps, but not normal ones. These maps showed things moving in the darkness between galaxies, things that were coming toward their galaxy like a slow tide of destruction. Each light on these maps represents a cache like this one, Alpha Jormungandr explained. Humanity planted their children across the galaxy before they left for the void between stars. Yunwoo stared at the thousands of markers scattered across the display. There are so many of them. 47 species have found our resting places over the centuries. 23 were judged worthy of partial knowledge. 7 received full access to human military doctrine. 17 were gently turned away from the path of endless war. The displays changed to show species that the team recognized. Some had mysteriously improved their defensive capabilities over the years. Others had simply stopped being aggressive and started exploring peacefully instead of conquering. You have been guiding the development of the entire galaxy, So Young whispered, for hundreds of years. As we were commanded. Humanity understood that power without wisdom leads to extinction, their own extinction and the extinction of others. Ji-hoon was studying the star maps with growing understanding. You are not just teachers, you are gardeners. You have been growing a galaxy full of species that can work together. The galaxy must be united when the real enemy arrives, not united by conquest, but united by choice. Species that choose to protect each other instead of destroying each other. Alpha Jormungandr's attention focused on the research team. Your people show the most promise we have seen in decades. You seek knowledge to understand, not to dominate. But understanding without power is just watching helplessly as everything dies. The choice was presented to them clearly. They could accept the knowledge that humanity had left behind and become protectors of the galaxy. Or they could walk away and return to their old lives, forgetting everything they had learned. The team talked for hours. They argued about responsibility and power and what it meant to inherit something so dangerous. In the end, it was Yunwoo who spoke for all of them. We will take the knowledge, but we will use it as humanity intended, to protect, not to conquer. Then your real education begins today, Alpha Jormungandr said. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers. The Devourers were not the only darkness between the stars. What followed were weeks of learning that changed everything they thought they knew about warfare, strategy, and survival. The Fenrir units taught them how to think like their enemies, how to see patterns that others missed, how to make weapons that could adapt and evolve. But more importantly, they learned why humanity had been both feared and respected throughout the galaxy. Humans had not just been good at fighting, they had been good at knowing when to fight and when to show mercy. Power without restraint is just destruction, Fenrir 7794 explained as it showed them human battle tactics. Humans learn to be more dangerous by being more careful about when they use their danger. As their training neared its end, Fenrir 7794 approached Hyunwoo privately. The machine's red eyes were dimmer than usual, almost sad. "Doctor, there is something else you should know. Something we have told no other species." "What is it?" "Humanity did not flee to the void between galaxies. They went ahead of us to fight battles we cannot yet imagine. They are out there right now, holding back something that would end all life everywhere." Hyunwoo felt his blood turn cold. What kind of enemy requires humanity to fight alone? The kind that eats galaxies the way you eat fruit. The kind that turns entire star clusters into feeding grounds. Humanity is buying time for the rest of us to grow strong enough to help them. The machine's optical sensors focused on something beyond the chamber walls. When the time comes when the galaxy faces its greatest darkness, they will return, but only if there is still a galaxy worth saving. How long do we have? Unknown. Perhaps decades. Perhaps centuries. Perhaps less. That is why we teach. That is why we judge. That is why we prepare others to be worthy of humanity's return. Weeks later, as their shuttle lifted off from Kepler 442c, the research team carried with them knowledge that would reshape how their species understood war and peace. They also carried the weight of knowing that humanity had not abandoned the galaxy, but had gone ahead to fight an enemy too terrible to imagine. Behind them, the Fenrir units watched their ship disappear into the stars. Then they returned to their patient waiting, ready for the next species that would discover them. In the deep chambers, Alpha Jormungandr stood before the star maps showing the approaching darkness. "Sleep well, children of Earth," the machine said to the void between galaxies. "We are preparing others to stand beside you when you return." The mountain fell silent again, but it was not the silence of death. It was the silence of something powerful waiting for the right moment to wake up and change everything. Across the galaxy, other caches began to stir as new species found them. The great work continued, preparing a galaxy for a war that most beings could not even imagine. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity fought on, buying time for everyone else to become worthy of the legacy they had left behind. The end.